In January of 2024, I told you what the pros and cons of living in Eugene, Oregon are. And I'll say that those pros and cons haven't changed. And pros and cons are still subjective. But I do think that there's obviously more to be said about the good things and the bad things about living in Eugene, Oregon. Hi, I'm Hannah Caldwell. I'm your local Eugene realtor. And if you're thinking of making a move to Eugene or anywhere in Lane County, please shoot me an email. I would love to see how I can help. So real quick, I want to recap those old pros and cons. And if you want, you can check out that video here. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but just to talk a little bit about what I had said the pros and cons of living in Eugene were last year. Number one, the nature. Literally like the first thing everyone thinks of when they're talking about Eugene or the Pacific Northwest in general is the abundance of natural beauty. It's always green, it's always beautiful, and because of that, there's so many outdoor activities and things to do that are involved with nature, whether that's winter sports like skiing and snowboarding or hiking, backpacking, our rivers, whitewater rafting or kayaking. We have great rock climbing. We have great mountain biking. So absolutely nature is still number one on my list. Tick. That is the biggest pro of living in Eugene, in my personal opinion. Still the same, not going to change. Back then I said that the size of Eugene is a pro for living in Eugene, and I still think this is the case. So Eugene is considered a larger metropolitan area. It is the second largest city in Oregon, following Portland, and it still retains like a bit of a small town feel. You can still commute anywhere in Eugene within 15 minutes. You still have a really strong sense of community, but you have the amenities of a larger city, and those will come in some of these additional pros that we talked about. One of those is the cuisine. I think personally that Eugene has a great array of restaurants, and of course restaurants are opening and closing constantly, but I think that we have, for the size of the city, a very good food scene with lots of options of all different types. I think that is still true. That is subjective. Lots of people have called me out saying that we don't have nearly the diversity of cuisine that they would like to see. But again, I think that for the size of the city, that is a big pro. The last thing that we talked about in our last video was entertainment and sports. Still the same. Hello. We are still home to the University of Oregon Ducks. We are also home to a semi-pro or a pro baseball team, a pro basketball team, and a pro soccer team. So when you're talking sports, we've got you covered in terms of all of the things that you could wish to see, especially if you're into track and field, because we are always going to be home of Tracktown USA and oftentimes the Olympic trials. In terms of entertainment, we still have a lot of great arts and culture to offer. We have the Holt Center, which is doing live Broadway tours all the time. We still have our, amazing dance companies. We still have so much live theater happening, especially in our satellite cities. So even in some of our rural satellite cities, live theater has been really, really big. So Cottage Grove Theater, Cottage Grove is 25 minutes south of Eugene, is constantly coming out with amazing live performances. So that is still definitely a pro of living in Eugene. When we talked last time, we talked about some cons, and the first one that comes to everybody's mind is the rain. Yes, it still rains in Eugene, Oregon, but I've made this argument before, and I don't think that it rains as much as people think it does. Our average annual precipitation is 46 inches per year. Obviously, in comparison to a lot of places in the United States, that is a lot, but you really don't feel like you're getting poured on for months and months like people try to explain. And our annual snowfall is 5 inches a year. 5 inches. With that being said, we have had an influx in winter storms in the form of ice storms, and that's been pretty unfortunate because at least in snow, for people that know how to navigate it, which is not most Oregonians, at least in snow you can still get around. In ice, there's nothing you can do. Last year we definitely had one of our more major ice storms, and it definitely caused a lot of problems. There were parts of Springfield that were without power for 12 plus days. So that is something that is becoming a little bit more of a common occurrence, is these like winter storms that aren't particularly snow, but more centered around ice. Of course, we are still just south of the grass seed capital of the world. So yes, allergens are still high. If you suffer from seasonal allergies, pollen allergies, then you're probably going to have a rough time in Eugene in the spring. I never suffered from seasonal allergies, and I still don't. Some people who never had move here and then start having allergies. You just never know. So that is still a con for a lot of people, because it can be really impactful to people's lives when they have really bad allergies. Another con that I talked about in my last video is the fact that a lot of the homes in Eugene are older homes. That's just the state of our city. We don't have a lot of new construction, and because of that, I think people are surprised that are moving to Eugene. People that are used to planned communities or places where there's more building happening. So that's a lot of places in the Southeast, that is places in the Southwest, that is in parts of California, that is in a lot of the Midwest, and like in parts of Minnesota and Indiana, where new construction is still happening quite frequently. We just don't have it. And so you'll move here and you will see that housing values are high for what you get, because what you get is generally a 60s to 80s ranch style home that hasn't been updated. So just prepare yourself, take a gander at Zillow, and just start to see what's available in the price point that you think you would be looking at, to normalize yourself with what the product is here, because it's probably different from where you're coming from. Of course, one of the cons of living anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, really, but Eugene specifically, especially for its size, is the cost of living. Eugene does have a high cost of living, and that is primarily due to our housing prices. So our rents and our mortgages, and the median cost of housing is high for our size of community and for the area that we're in. We just follow Portland. We're barely underneath it. And honestly, I've had some clients that have been purchasing in Portland lately, and I honestly think that like some of the areas in Portland are pretty comparable in terms of what you're getting for the value. So yes, cost of living is probably only going to continue to increase. We are seeing, goods and services increase at a pretty significant rate. So dining out, gas and groceries, all of these things, cost of living is high, so it's definitely something to consider. The other two things that were on our cons list from the previous video were our roadways, which is still a con, and probably even maybe more of a con now than it was then. Eugene was built on a grid system, and so it's got a lot of funky roads. It's got one-ways doing weird things and weird turnoffs. But I will say what has been happening more lately is road construction. There has been a significant amount of road construction on major thoroughfares in and around our downtown area that have really, which is funny because they really don't cause that much of a backup, but they feel like they're causing me a big inconvenience. There you go, an inconvenience. So yes, road work is constantly happening. Our roads sometimes change. Sometimes there's one ways and then they turn to not one ways or what have you. But that's kind of just a constant state of flux in terms of road work and what's happening in Eugene to improve traffic flow. And then our last con was nightlife. Still the case. If you're looking for a party town, this is not it. Unless I guess you're a U of O student, and then like maybe you can figure it out. But if you are looking for a town with like a big nightlife, if you are a person that like works distinct hours and you're looking to go out after work, but that is late at night, you may have a hard time finding things to do in Eugene after 11 p.m. And that's just the reality. That is all encompassed in that last video, and I go more in depth in all of those pros and cons. So certainly watch that if you're interested in those. But here are some new pros and cons that I have just really popped up for me, especially lately in my life, and in lots of people's lives in town, I think, that are impactful of what it's like living in Eugene. So one of my new pros of living in Eugene is that we have a regional airport. Not only do we have a regional airport, it is within 15 minutes from the city. It is super easily accessible. It is small, which there's, pros and cons in and of itself of it being small, but it just means that it's not overly busy. TSA is never really that backed up. You don't have to wait like a whole long time at baggage claim for your bags, but it still has a lot of amenities. It still has rental car agencies on site. It still has a lot of direct flights. And they're adding them all the time. The Eugene Chamber of Commerce and the City of Eugene are constantly working with airline partners to increase the number of direct flights leaving Eugene. But right now, you can fly direct to, of course, Portland, Seattle, Tacoma, but like a ton of different California airports, a ton. Both Phoenix airports, Las Vegas, Dallas, Fort Worth. So we really have a lot of direct flights going to a lot of major hubs in the United States. And I will say that like even when you have a flight that's not going to one of those direct locations, your layover is usually in Portland or Seattle, and it's usually, pretty insignificant. And so the convenience for having the airport within 15 minutes of your house outweighs the need for that one layover in Seattle or Portland. Like, I think that having the airport, this was really stark in the last year because I've done like quite a lot of traveling, and now I'm traveling with small children, and having the airport close and small and accessible and easy to get through has been such a blessing. And it was probably something that I was taking for granted for a long time. Another pro that I've discussed on the channel in various videos, but not specifically in that pros and cons video, is the bikeability of Eugene. Now, this is still 100% a pro. And it is one of the most bikeable cities in the United States. It's got 187 miles of protected bike lanes throughout the city. It's got 14 miles of dedicated off-street bike paths, including our like Willamette River bike path that goes all the way from Springfield to North Eugene along the side of the Willamette River, and it's absolutely beautiful and stunning, but also is a great way to commute from one part of town to the other. I will say that our bike paths and trails are central to the areas that are flatter, right? And so we do have some hilly areas in Eugene that are not really bike accessible. So that is like South Eugene Hills, basically everything south of 18th Avenue and west of Willamette, and then again everything south of 18th Avenue and east of Amazon, right? So there's a little valley of South Eugene that stays flat and is still quite accessible through all of the bike paths, but it is restricted to the places that are flatter. But that is all of downtown, a lot of your shopping and groceries, most of your restaurants and entertainment, all of that is very accessible via bike. And with that being said, we also have bike rental service. So Peace Health sponsors bike rentals throughout town. And, there's definitely a lot of bike culture in Eugene. So there's a lot of bike shops. There's a lot of nonprofits that are providing bikes for people or for children or providing services. And it just is a strong biking culture in Eugene. And that is definitely a pro because it's beautiful. It's beautiful to ride your bike here. One of my other pros that is probably the case in a lot of other towns as well, but of course, like here is where I experience it, is that our culture puts a really heavy emphasis on shopping local or supporting local vendors or, finding ways to promote people from within our community. Specifically in produce. Like we have a lot of small farms in and around Eugene and Lane County, and like a ton of farmers markets. So we have the Lane County Farmers Market, which is our big farmers market. It exists at the Eugene Saturday Market. The city created its own farmers market pavilion. So it's an actual building that was erected specifically to house our farmers market, so that it can be more multi-seasonal. And in addition to that very large farmers market, we have kind of satellite farmers markets. So we have the Whitaker Community Market, which is in the Whitaker community, kind of north of downtown. And that has a lot of artisans, but also some produce. We also have the Amazon market. So that serves, and these are all on different days. So you have more access. You don't have to rely on one day going to the farmers market. You can say, oh, I actually need some stuff. Today's Thursday. I can go to the Amazon farmers market at the Amazon Community Center, which serves the South Eugene population more than the Lane County Farmers Market or the Whitaker Farmers Market. There's the Spencer Creek Grange Market. So that's way out southwest Eugene, kind of rural. It's at the Spencer's Creek Grange. And that is a small micro farmers market, but serves that whole rural population. And that is, again, on a different day of the week. Then we have so many small farms that are doing community supported agriculture. So they're doing CSA boxes that you can purchase and you can pick up at a specific location that's convenient for you, or you can have delivered. And there's different varieties of those that are doing different levels of production and different types of crops. So I just think that like our emphasis on local vendors has been really prevalent, especially lately, and is a huge pro for me, and I'm sure a lot of you. And that kind of leads into my another new pro, is that I feel like, and this is subjective, so don't come for me, but I feel like our community has a strong cultural emphasis on healthy living. And like, obviously that's evidenced by those other pros that I've talked about: being in nature, being bikeable, supporting local vendors. So like eating food that is produced closer to home and is more organic. All of those things contribute to this culture of healthy living. But on top of that, like there just is, you will see there's a lot of opportunity for outdoor exercise and recreation through bike paths, walking paths, running paths, hiking. So the Ridgeline Trail System, that's 19 miles of trail system. But also just like the abundance of gyms and more, but really like an emphasis on a lot of health food restaurants, health food stores, as well as so many different opportunities for gyms and exercise. So huge presence of yoga in Eugene, in yoga studios, HIIT studios, or just like so many different options, Pilates, you name it, and it's here in Eugene, and you have the opportunity to take part in it. And so so many things play into this healthy living and this culture of healthy living, which I think is a huge pro. That takes us kind of into the cons, because this con directly pertains to healthy living, and it is the state of our healthcare system in Eugene. Our healthcare system in Eugene is having a very difficult time. First off, there's primarily two major players in, especially in primary care, in Eugene, and that's Peace Health and Oregon Medical Group. And the big thing is that Peace Health is the provider of the largest hospital in Riverbend, but that's located in Springfield. Our only other hospital, I guess Kaiser Permanente, is also one of those big players. So Peace Health, Kaiser, and Oregon Medical Group. The only other hospital is Willamette, also located in Springfield. In the city of Eugene, we do not have a single hospital or emergency room department, which for a city of our size, a population of over 175,000 people is pretty crazy. Yes, Riverbend is literally across the highway. It's 10 minutes from most of Eugene. But for us to not have like a hospital in our city limits, it has really affected our emergency response. There's a lot of ramifications of not having a hospital within our city limits, especially also for the satellite communities like Florence, Veneta, Junction City, Harrisburg, places that are more west. Also, just like basically everywhere in the world right now, there is some issues with finding enough healthcare personnel, and also whether or not those healthcare personnel are being paid and treated appropriately. There was in 2024 the longest healthcare worker strike in Eugene, which lasted 46 days. And this perpetuates a lot of problems, but there's already problems with accessibility of providers. And like, if you move here and you're looking for a primary care doctor, you are probably going to have a very hard time. There's very few that are accepting new patients. We just don't have enough providers for the size of our population, especially when we're feeding those satellite communities. And so that is definitely a con to be aware of when you're thinking of moving to Eugene. That being said, it could be a pro, because if you are a healthcare provider or a healthcare worker, there is always ample opportunity for employment. So, like I said, pros and cons are all subjective. My next con that, again, I've talked about in a lot of videos, but not specifically in that pros and cons video, is houselessness. And it is something that has become synonymous with Oregon, because of Portland as well, but really synonymous with Eugene. And houselessness is a super complex issue and is still very prevalent, but we are seeing improvements. It's complicated. The number of sheltered people has increased from 2023 to 2024, and is continuing to trend better. So the number of people that are sheltered and houseless as opposed to unsheltered is improving. And this is a benefit, because a lot of the cons that people feel about this population of people in our community is that the prevalence of seeing them live in camps and on the streets, and the fear of crime and proximity to drug use and those sorts of things. And so the fact that more people are sheltered now, which means they're being provided services, they're off the streets, they're less likely to commit crimes, they're getting help for addiction issues. The fact that number has improved, and pretty significantly, is like a very good sign for our community. And I feel personally, anecdotally, like I can see that. Like, I don't see them in my day-to-day life as I'm moving through the city nearly as much as I felt like I did just a couple of years ago. With that being said, the number of houseless people, total, unsheltered and sheltered, has not changed. And of the most recent 2024 study of houselessness in Eugene, 50% of the people were newly houseless. So this is what I mean when it's a complex issue. Like, it's improving, we have services, but it is going to forever be an ongoing issue. And some of the things that are just aspects of our community are perpetuating that. And that is the cost of living, especially the cost of housing. So the cost of rent, particularly, also the just availability of decent rentals, low-income housing. It just is not enough to serve the population. And our cost of living, as inflation grows, our cost of living gets more difficult. They're finding it harder and harder to, survive within the realm of how much it costs to live in Eugene. Also our employment and like the availability of decent paying jobs is not as high in Eugene as it is in a lot of other places in the United States. So lots of contributing factors to this very complex issue. It is still an issue. If this is something that, you know, is a concern for you, definitely consider it before you think about moving to Eugene. One of these cons that is kind of like a direct opposition to one of my pros is the fact that I do still believe that Eugene is car dependent. So despite being one of the most bikeable cities in all of the United States, I do think that this is hard. It really is so subjective and it is so personal, but like I live on a very large hill and the thought of biking places just actually like is impossible. Like I cannot bike up my hill, so I can bike down, and we do as a family. We do go on bike rides, and it is a 10-minute bike ride to downtown for us from where we live, but like on the way home, I'm like, okay, we'll stop at the park and we'll have you come pick the bikes up and drive us the rest of the way. And you know, part of this is culturally as well. You know, you just need to get places quickly. You're working, you're doing things, you need to get kids to events, you need to get to your job, and doing so via a car is just unfortunately more efficient. So when you are being, you know, dependent on car transport, you can get so many places in Eugene so quickly. And so from that perspective, I do think that Eugene is still pretty car dependent. And maybe that's just as the case now everywhere. But I do think that that's a con. I wish that I could also bike everywhere and not have to worry about it. But here I am driving a car. Another one of my cons that it has become definitely a more prevalent issue in the most recent years is wildfire season. When we're talking about weather, people think, oh, like Oregon's so rainy, and like they worry about the winters and they worry about surviving seasonal depression. But certainly fire season has become a much more significant issue in the summer season. So we have, I mean, our wildfire seasons really started to ramp up in 2020. 2020 was a huge wildfire. It was the record-breaking wildfire season in Oregon, and it was when the Mackenzie River Gorge burned pretty significantly, and that was the closest really that a major fire had gotten to the cities of Eugene and Springfield, and that caused major air pollution, really poor air quality for like probably a week and a half at least, and was like really significant. Like that stands out, that fire season stands out in my head as like the first time that I'd ever experienced anything like that in my life. I'm born and raised in Oregon, and growing up, I never like really felt fire season. Like there were maybe like a couple days a year where you got like a little bit of smoke and it just looked like a little bit foggy. No, this was like, you know, this was like those photos that you've seen, like this is apocalyptic, the world is ending, the sky is orange, like this is terrifying. So 2020 really stands out in my head as this like kind of like the beginning of fire seasons in Oregon for me. And it's been there every year since. So I would say we have a couple days to a week of pretty rough air quality every summer. That fires haven't been quite as close, I would say, as that 2020 Mackenzie fire. So like it isn't quite so like terrifyingly apocalyptic. But with that being said, in 2024, Oregon had its worst wildfire season. It broke the 2020 record with 1.9 million acres burned. And so despite them not being quite as close to Eugene, so not like feeling quite as like, clearly the issue in terms of wildfires is getting worse. More land is burning. We have much less rainfall than we have historically. So that is an issue that I will probably continue to see happening years forward. And it's something to consider. It really does affect you for about a week every year. The last con that I do want to talk about, because I don't think I did in that other video, is crime for a city of this size. So, and specifically property crime. So property crime, petty theft, burglary, break-ins, carjacking, these are really common crimes in Eugene. I mean, common is relative. I think I've said in videos before that, like, you know, I had a houseless person sleep in my car one time because I accidentally left it unlocked, but they didn't take anything. I've never had a house broken into. I've never had a car stolen, but I do know people that have. And when you look at the statistics, Eugene has and I don't know where they pull these percentages from, but this is just the internet talking, is that Eugene has a 57.8% property crime rate as opposed to the national average, which is 35.4%. So that's a drastic difference. So like when people talk about crime in Eugene, I kind of always scoff because I'm like, I personally feel quite safe in Eugene. I feel like it's a very safe community. But I mean, statistics do show that we do have a relatively high crime rate especially in terms of property crime. And like actually our violent crime rate is a little bit higher than the national average as well. So clearly when people are concerned about the crime rate in Eugene, that does exist. Again, subjective. Like I personally feel like Eugene is safe, and I grew up in a much safer community. If you've watched my video about, I don't even remember what it's titled, but like about where I grew up, which is Sherwood, Oregon, that is an extremely safe community. And I don't necessarily feel less safe in Eugene than I did growing up in Sherwood. So very subjective, but the statistics are there. We do seem to have a problem with crime in Eugene. And, you know, always being addressed by the city, coming up with new policies, you know, new trainings for the police force, all of those things. But that being said, those are my updated 2025 pros and cons of living in Eugene. I hope this video helped you in your decision if you're thinking about making a move here. And again, if you are thinking about making a move here, please shoot me an email. I would love to help you. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.